On this episode of Locked On NBA, I'm going to talk with Kane Pitman of Locked On Bucks about Milwaukee winning the NBA title from a local perspective. Hey, stay tuned. It's coming up right now.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey guys, another episode of Locked On NBA for a Monday. I'm talking with Kane Pitman of Locked On Bucks today about the Milwaukee Bucks winning the NBA title. This show is brought to you by BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. Baseball season is in full swing and you can track all of that action at BetOnline. Get all of the latest news, odds, and info for all of your sporting needs at BetOnline. And before the next pitch, head to BetOnline on your laptop or mobile device and check out all of the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, and contest information. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore, as this is your chance to get into the game as teams prep for their runs to the playoffs. Head to betonline.ag, use our promo code LOCKEDON, and sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline are your online sportsbook experts. All right, so let's get to it now and bring in Kane to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks and talk about that championship from a local perspective. All right, so let's bring him in now. The great man, Kane Pitman, is here with me to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. He is, of course, the host of the Locked On Bucks podcast. Kane, now we have spoken about, or not me personally, but others on the Locked On NBA podcast have spoken about Milwaukee winning the championship naturally, but we haven't got a local perspective. And unfortunately, you are sitting in a beautiful apartment, not in Milwaukee, but in Melbourne. But you know people in Milwaukee. You've been living in Milwaukee for years. What does this first NBA championship in 50 years for the Milwaukee Bucks mean locally for that Milwaukee community?
Yeah, I'll say, first of all, if you had have asked me what I would be doing at the moment that the Bucks won a championship, it probably wouldn't have been sitting in my living room by myself in Melbourne watching the game. So that was perhaps a little bit of a letdown from my own selfish perspective. But the city itself, I think everyone saw the amount of people that turned up. Now, I do think there was some general excitement for people to gather again and get behind a sporting team, given everything else that has happened. But I also think the journey of this Milwaukee team, from the failures in 2019, getting so close to the NBA Finals, and then the complete disaster in the bubble. Is Giannis going to leave? The external pressure that Giannis is about to walk out the door from the franchise, all the question marks over Mike Budenholzer. I think what we saw with the celebrations from not only the team but the fans was the culmination of all that pressure that felt like it was mounting on this team finally being realized that they were the NBA champions, and they'll be able to hold that forever. And it just feels like, as a franchise, they were able to withstand a lot of adversity to get there.
Yeah, look, everyone's going to come out here and say, well, you know, if KD's foot wasn't on the line, then we wouldn't even be having this discussion. But in the end, that I'm sure no Bucks fan gives a single shit about that at all. They are the NBA champions, the rightful NBA championship holders. And Kane, one thing that, again, doesn't get mentioned is Giannis was dealing with a significant knee injury. Like, I didn't know that he'd be able to play in Game 1. I didn't think he'd be at 100%. Instead, he goes out there and drops multiple 40 bombs, has a 50-point game in the sealer, plays amazing defense, and it was like that knee injury didn't happen. And they didn't have Dante DiVincenzo, one of their key members on a team that did not have much depth at all. He was out for basically the whole playoff. So they didn't do it through zero adversity. They had tons of issues going against them. So I think that needs to be, if we're going to say, oh, what about injuries and foot on the line? Like, the Bucks had their bunch of stuff that they had to go through to get there as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think the DiVincenzo injury was one of the most overlooked aspects of the postseason with all the contenders, when you consider he was a starter from opening night. And I think everyone understood when the Bucks went all into Drew Holiday and made the moves that they made, that they were sacrificing depth and they wanted to have a stronger top end, which is all great. That's what most championship contenders do. But then you see, when you have those injuries, all of a sudden you get to a postseason or an NBA Finals where you're like, okay, well, we're only playing 7 guys right now. And that's where the Bucks essentially were come the finals. But as far as Giannis goes, we had a number of our listeners on Locked On Bucks reach out to us and say, I went back and listened to the podcast you guys did after Game 4 against Atlanta when the series was 2-2. Giannis had just gone down. And I don't think it could be any lower than that in terms of what you thought was going to happen for the Bucks moving forward. And we actually spent that entire podcast not discussing the series. The result of the series almost felt irrelevant. We were very concerned about what this meant for the 2022 season. And was he going to be able to play? And then what does the franchise do? They're going to be right up against the salary cap or over the cap. And then maybe they have a superstar that doesn't play for a year. So to go from that low point to all of a sudden him being back, and not just being back, being really better than ever, having 50 points in a closeout game in an NBA championship is just, it's absolutely absurd. I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah, it was, look, again, we lose perspective of that we didn't know he was going to play in game one, and he's out here with 50-50 and 40-40 and 50 in 3 of the last 4 games of the series with, huge blocks, and it does get a little bit swept under the rug, but that's not what we're going to look for moving forward. We're fine with Giannis's health now moving forward. We know that he did it his way, staying with a small market team, which I just hate that term. I hate that designation, so I apologize for bringing it up. But he signed. He didn't leave, despite ESPN doing their best efforts to try and make him leave. He stayed there. We know that part. But now what happens? Because 2 key parts of that, you said, 7-man rotation. PJ Tucker, he's a free agent. Bobby Portis is probably going to be declining his player option. So, are we expecting these guys back? Are we expecting the Bucks to run back this same squad? Look, they're not favorites to be the back-to-back champions. The Nets have been installed as favorites so far. So what does Milwaukee do in this offseason?
Yeah, there's a couple of things they'll be looking at. You mentioned the 2 key pieces with PJ Tucker and Bobby Portis, and Tucker for a mid-season trade for a contender, what you hope to get out of him. I think PJ Tucker absolutely filled that role, and you look at what he did in the Brooklyn series for sure, defending Kevin Durant and just being that physical presence, that veteran. I think they got what they wanted out of him. Now, I'm sure that they would be happy for him to come back, but if PJ Tucker looks at this and says, I'm 36, I want a couple of years on decent money, then the reality is he might not be back in Milwaukee. I think that's fair to say. There was an article he did with The Athletic where he kind of hinted at the fact that, he's looking to get rewarded. He hasn't really been paid in a big way throughout his career. So Tucker might be the one that's out. Bobby Portis, we'll see. With Bobby, you got to ask the question, maybe he loves being the hero of Milwaukee. Maybe he doesn't want to leave. Is he going to get the Bobby chance elsewhere? We'll see. I do expect that he is going to opt out. It'll just be whether the Bucks can rearrange some finances there to have him happy and bring him back. I'm sure they would love to. I think the other big need they need is a backup point guard. I mean, we saw Jeff Teague playing minutes in Game 6 of the NBA Finals. They signed DJ Augustine in the offseason. That didn't work out. It was miraculous that they were able to flip that contract to get PJ Tucker back. But I do think a veteran point guard is certainly one of the big priorities. We saw with the injury to Donte DiVincenzo, they lacked ball handling, which was why Teague had to play. The status for DiVincenzo for the start of next season is up in the air. We suspect that he might miss a little bit of time. So I would say some more ball handling for sure.
Next question is, we talked to Giannis. I probably should have put this a little bit earlier, but the debate then comes about Giannis, and people, I guess there's a certain level of disrespect towards his accomplishments and how good he is. Now, I know what you're going to say here, but Giannis is a top 5 player in the NBA. I think it's pretty clear, but there are plenty of people who would disagree with that. So give us your, not impassioned plea, because you don't need to plead for the bloke who's a back-to-back MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, NBA Champion, Finals MVP. But why is it maybe more to the point that he's not universally considered that?
Well, he's not a jump shooter, and I think we've seen that over the course of the last probably decade. That I think in general people associate the best players in the league with guys that can hit a jump shot. I mean, that's honestly what it feels like to me, because I don't think you can question Giannis now when you go through his resume. You already listed off all the achievements that he already has. He's only 26. This guy isn't going to turn 27 until into the next season, which is absolutely ridiculous. He's won a title earlier than a lot of the all-time greats. So his trajectory is heading in a ridiculous path. And now that he has won the title, and now that he has won the Finals MVP, and even through this postseason run, you already mentioned some of the media outlets that were trying to say, Chris Middleton's the best player in this team. Chris Middleton's the Finals MVP. And then he dropped 50 and 2 other 40-point games in the NBA Finals. They're out of excuses. There's nothing you can say. We all sat here and watched it. He's a top 5 player. You can say he's top 3. You can say he's top 1, whatever you want. But they're out of excuses now. There's nothing they can say.
I'm guessing you're saying that he's maybe more of a Batman than a Robin, Kane. Perhaps that's where we're going.
Carry on. Carry on.
All right, that'll do it for us today, Kane. Thank you for coming on and speaking from a local perspective on the Bucks. Of course, you can hear all of Kane's takes over on Locked On Bucks throughout the week and over on his Twitter feed at Kane Pitman. Kane, thank you for coming on.
Anytime, man. Thank you.